truth and imperfect living.
Hey, greetings, folks. I'm Greg Willits from RosaryArmy.com.
And I'm Jennifer Willits, his wife.
Welcome to another program. Can you talk and pour coffee at the same time? I was really impressed that I just pulled that off.
Yes, I can. I can. We
had a good date weekend. We were supposed to go over and see Dan Burke and his wife Stephanie from Avila. We've talked about this. Had them on the program. They invited us over to Avila Institute, and then we just had our...
And I accepted said invitation, and we've been working for months trying to nail down the perfect weekend where they were free and we were free.
And there was still a mishap, and it didn't happen. And so we found ourselves suddenly going, okay, now we have Lily's going to a friend's house. We had a night free. What do we do? And we talked about going somewhere, and we're like, we just didn't want to spend the money, quite honestly. So we decided to go, and we went out to eat. And then the next day, we made a commitment that we were on. It was a Saturday. We're going to get out of the bed, get out of the bedroom, get out of the house, and go somewhere else because we are in this house all the time, especially me. I mean, I'm in the house. There are days literally where I don't go outside, and that's not necessarily
healthy.
Yeah, it's not healthy.
Or good for production value.
So between doing all of the Rosary Army work and all the production work, I mean, I'm in this room a lot. And when I'm not in this room, I'm normally in our bedroom, sitting in a chair, reading or looking at something on
looking at the computer.
Yeah, looking at my computer down there. So I moved from the desktop to the laptop and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So we really needed to get out. And so we decided to do that. And so we had a great
So how
weekend.
did you stumble on LJ?
Well, I just knew LJ was out. I mean, it's in North Georgia, and I started searching out for North Georgia towns. We've hit up Dahlonega a lot, which is in the northern part of, and that's probably the best known. Helen, Georgia, I know a lot of people like, but I don't really like that because it's very touristy.
Correct. I agree.
It has Helen, Georgia is kind of an anomaly. If you've never heard of Helen, Georgia, it's got like this German theme thing going on, and I don't really understand why, and I don't really need to know why.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a plaque somewhere that gives the story.
And then there's other, there's a lot of little hubs, and I don't always like. I'm not much of an explorer, right? I don't. When we go places, you like to hit up all the museums and hit up all the, and it doesn't do much for me. You know, I don't really get into that. I do enjoy, like we went into a lot, LJ had a lot of, they weren't pawn shops, what are they called? Like
antique thrifting shops.
Yeah, antique stores. Mm-hmm. And I do really enjoy when I find old books, because every once in a while, I'll find something that just is really neat and old that I actually want. But we looked through a lot. I saw nothing. That I actually, I mean, there was one that I almost bought, and I kind of regret that I didn't get it.
What?
Which one do you think?
Well, you had a couple things that we said, wow, this is a good deal.
Yeah.
There was a book in your hand that you said this was a good deal, and I don't remember because I also looked at the classic book section, and then I just started seeing things. Yeah. Or it could have been a comic book.
No, no.
It was the classic book that you had?
There were no real comic books. I wasn't. I'll never buy a comic book at a thrift store.
Oh, no. Brothers Karamazov.
Yeah.
Karamazov by Dostoevsky.
Because I'm almost done with Crime and Punishment. It's been a 3-month. I won't call it an ordeal. Yeah. It's been a 3-month challenge. You got me a copy of Crime and Punishment for my birthday, and I'm just like, I'm going to read the thing. But it was a hardcover, good condition. Copy
really good.
of the Brothers Karamazov, which I've only read about 100 or 200 pages of it in the past, and I didn't finish it on my Kindle. So that's in the back of my head. But I just couldn't do it because I'm like, it's
too soon.
Well, I'm not going to read it anytime soon. But now I wish I'd gotten it because it was such a good copy, and I know at some point I want to tackle Brothers Karamazov.
So I just want to say I'm very, very grateful that you had this renewed sort of enthusiasm to sort of be with me and to sort of I know I could tell that you really wanted me to enjoy my weekend. And I really, really did, because I really needed it to happen. I was kind of very devastated that the original plans fell through because I just saw, oh no, there's a hole now. We can't just keep staying in this house. And so as a wife, I greatly appreciated just having a slow-paced weekend in a lovely mountain town. The weather was unusually great, still kind of cold, but just sort of perfect. And it was sunny, and you knew that was good for business. In a small town that thrives on commerce, they need good weather days.
I need to correct one thing that you just said.
What?
I wouldn't say I had a renewed enthusiasm for my wife.
Well, okay. it's hard to find
Well,
just the right nuance. But you
or to
wanted to
spend
take
ti-
me out. You
Yeah.
wanted to have me.
Or
You wanted me to
spending
have
time
a good
with
time.
you. You're my best friend.
Yeah.
You're my favorite person to be with. I always like being with you.
Yeah.
So that's not. I don't need renewed enthusiasm
Yeah,
for that because I'm
right.
like, what do you want to do? I just want to hang out with Jennifer.
Or maybe it was a renewed enthusiasm to get out of the house.
Well, I mean, it very much was I was feeling the need to get out of the house, but it was. I will say I had a great awareness that you needed to get out of the house, and I wanted to. And you hadn't. It's been winter, right? We've been
Yeah.
inside.
yeah.
And so it's like we had an opportunity to get out, go do something different. And I've also been very aware the last few months, as it's been winter, we rarely go more than 10, 15 miles from the house.
Mhm.
And I don't want to go into Atlanta, which is about an hour away. We've done that. And we're not city dwellers. We don't, what are we going to do? Go to the Coke Museum or,
Right.
we're not, I don't care, right? I don't care about that. So I knew that something different needed to be done, and that was the challenge of how do we, we need to experience new things, right? It's like,
Right.
even though we've been married 28 years, that doesn't mean it's like, well, we've experienced everything there is to experience. We still need to try to find experiences that both of us can be happy with.
Right. And to that end, one of the things that I thought about, I don't know if you thought about this as we were embarking on our excursion, sometimes I'm not really sure what we're going to talk about, because you have to understand, dear listener, we're with each other 24/7 and all we do is talk. Like, this is what we do for a living. And then when we're not on the microphone, we're still having conversations about what's happening in our lives and all this. And so I thought, well, now we're in a situation where we're going to sit and eat in front of each other. And what are we going to say? And yet,
Man, I don't worry
the
about it.
conversation just had a natural sort of flow. So it's like,
Because we're married.
well, I know, but because we're married, we know everything there is to know about each other.
Oh,
you
there's-
know?
no.
But there's still some things that comes like, I didn't
Lately-
know that about you.
Lately, I've been have you noticed I've done this a few times lately where I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell a story that you've never heard.
Yeah, and you did do that.
I've told a few
recently.
I've told a few stories recently I'm
and
like,
some I wish you hadn't shared. Said, that could have stayed buried. You know.
are you talking about the one guy I knew, and I drove
I
him
don't want
somewhere?
to think about it. I don't want to go there. But it was something that I remember going, ooh, no,
Yeah, well, I
you
mean,
shouldn't.
hey, it happened to me. I don't want to deny what happened to me, and that's so. Anyway,
Okay.
so we had a good date weekend, and it brought up a lot of other things. The timing of it was really good for us to go because we also had the opportunity to talk about a lot of other things that have been happening in our lives, and it's always so weird with what we do here on the podcast, and we've talked about this for March will be 19 years that we've been podcasting. So we did the first show.
Wow.
Well, I did the first show, March of 2005. But after you joined, we quickly found out, well, we could talk about what's happening in our lives, in our family. What are we struggling with, right? Adventures in imperfect living. How do we deal with it in relation to our faith? Are we making decisions in life, and are our actions reflective of our Catholic faith in all the things that we do, and in the conversations that we're having, in the thoughts we're having? I mean, right, in my thoughts and in my words, what I've done, what I failed to do. How do we make sure that we're staying on the right path? When we stumble, we go to confession. We make sure that we're reconciled to God. We constantly are trying to study and learn more about our faith so that we can be better Catholics. And so a lot of the discussions that we had while we were out on our date day were revolving around things that have been happening in extended family situations over the last few months, and what's our culpability, what's our responsibility, how are we supposed to react, and a lot of it also ties back into the great amount of learning that I have had in therapy, and then you have had vicariously because of my experiences, and I feel like both of us have really learned a lot about relationships with other people, codependency, passive aggressiveness, all of the, narcissistic relationships, all these outside types of relationships that exist, and what's a healthy way for us to react when something negative comes our way from someone else. And so all those things kind of came up, and are we acting as Catholics in the way that we should be acting in our relationships with outside people? And in the meantime, you and I are, and I always hesitate to speak for you.
Oh, well, you say what you
Okay.
think, and then I'll correct.
I feel like we are at a happier point than we've been at for a while because so many wounds from the past have been addressed, particularly in my life.
Mhm.
And when you address certain wounds from your past, and I'm being intentionally vague. We might go into detail here in a second, but when the wounds from my past were addressed, it requires a different approach to things in the future. And encounters, if someone wounded you in the past, well, forgiveness might be able to be offered, but if there's no acknowledgement on the other side from the person who did the wounding that anything happened, then there may not be a possibility of moving forward with that person. And so these kinds of conversations are what we were having while we were out having coffee and lunch and everything.
And I'd like to interject a story because we did talk about the bigger topic of forgiveness and how it operates and when do you seek it, or what if you can't? Like, what if the person in your life is already dead? What do you do with all these really real situations?
When you seek forgiveness or when you seek to offer forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? And so there's two different things.
Right.
If you did a wrong, you need to seek out and, apologize for the wrong that you did.
I mean, like, as soon as you become aware of it,
Yeah.
and when it becomes known.
If you're aware of a wound,
Yeah.
large or small, it would behoove you to pick up the phone, send an email, let the person know, I'm really sorry for what I did.
Right.
But it's when you need to forgive someone, even if they haven't forgiven you, that can be the challenge.
Okay. So when I can't remember if I shared this. I'm pretty sure I did in some podcast at some point in our podcasting career, where I was sexually abused at the age of like 7 or 8. Okay. And it was an extended family member who did this terrible thing. Now, it took years for that actual moment of abuse to become fully revealed, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s when that started to become fully revealed to me. And I think that's actually a merciful move by God, because the brain just cannot process it at the time that these things occur. And so for years, I didn't even know there was an abuse at all. That was the default position. But as an adult, when I was better able to comprehend the reality, and then I finally had the tools and the resources to do something about it, because now I'm in a marriage. Now this is going to wreak a little havoc in my marriage with Greg if I don't deal with this. And so this was a situation where I knew an apology was never going to come to me from the person who conducted the wrongdoing. But in my case, and I can only speak for me, I didn't care about that reality or that component, that end of the transaction.
Of receiving an apology.
Yeah, I didn't even want it. All I wanted to do was just forgive. For me, it was always a one-way transaction. In that moment, I called up this individual and invited him to my home, and I just said, I just wanted to say, as an adult, I now know what happened when I was a child.
And he knew what was about to happen. I mean, he knew what you wanted to talk about.
I only could suspect.
But you told me
after the fact.
Yeah, he knew what you were going to talk about.
But when I was having the conversation, I didn't fully know.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, that's not on me. I don't care. What I care about right now is that I forgive you. And I want you to hear from me. I want you to see my face. And I want to tell you that I forgive you for what you did. Because for whatever reason, that was the most important part to me. And I'm so glad I did. I felt so much grace that day. And then he was free to respond however he wanted to respond. Thankfully, he responded, I felt, in a fitting manner. He was able to sort of have a version of contrition. Now, he's not a practicing Catholic or anything like that, but he demonstrated a contrition that honestly I wasn't sure I was ever going to see, but it was nice to see. And I could give him some instant comfort, but I don't communicate with this individual. There's just really no need, but I wish him well. I truly do.
You might see him on occasion.
And then we can sort of act be
Yeah,
polite
yeah.
and do the whole thing, how's the weather, whatever. And it doesn't feel overly fake or anything like that. So that's always kind of in the back of my mind. And I'm so glad I had that experience.
But
Honestly.
so a different experience around the same story. I also had to work at forgiving that person.
Yes.
Because of what he did to my wife, which later on caused rifts within our marriage that I didn't know that I was going to have to be experiencing.
Right.
And so there have been times where I've had to really struggle over the damage that was inflicted upon you as a child. And so I don't say this in sort of like, hey, look at me. I never received an apology, nor do I ever expect one from him.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been times where I've been tempted to call him up and say, hey, just so you know, buddy, but what that wouldn't do any good, right? That would only stir up, because what's important in that case is for me to forgive, and he probably has no idea whatsoever that type of long-standing damage, because he isn't really practicing any sort of faith, right. that the idea of sort of the ripple effects of sin, right?
Right. The ramifications.
The ramifications of sin can it doesn't just hurt, and this is the whole idea of the body of Christ, right? Your sins don't just hurt you and your relationship with God. Your sins hurt the body of Christ, and they can have these negative tendrils that hurt, and they can spread. And so when you think about, for example, you hear about generational sins, there are a lot of different viewpoints of generational sins, but the idea is if your father or your grandfather or your great-grandfather did some sort of thing, that the behavior can be passed on to the generations, and then that sinfulness or those sinful inclinations or those behavioral traits can be spread. I saw a meme just recently, and I thought it was kind of interesting, and I can't remember the exact wording that this meme used, but it was a great example, right? It had 4 panels, and they were painted kind of like looking like Norman Rockwell era. So this may have been around for a long time, and it was something along the lines of situational wounds is what the caption
message,
was. The first panel was a man standing in an office while his boss, and they're both like wearing bow ties and proper suits, and the boss is yelling at the man. Right, and then the next panel is the man comes home, and again, looked like 1940s, 50s, right? The man is holding a sock with his hand in the sock, and his fingers are coming out of the toes of the sock, and he's yelling at his wife because the socks weren't repaired. Right, again, different time.
Yeah,
right.
You didn't darn my socks,
right,
woman.
Right. It's like are these socks, right? And then the next panel is there's something spilled on the floor, and the mother now is yelling at the child. And then the last panel was the boy had dropped marbles on the floor, and he's bent over in the same posture as his mother, as his father, as that boss, and he's yelling at the cat. And it's just like the anger gets transferred down unless you stop it. The sinfulness can get transferred down unless you stop it.
Somebody has to stop the cycle.
Yeah, someone has to stop the cycle. Now, fortunately, again, in reconciliation, the cycle can be stopped if you're contrite and if you resolve the change, and if you seek out the forgiveness and reconciliation with others, rather than holding on to no, I was right in doing what I did, or I don't remember what I did, or whatever it is. Contrition can heal so many things. And so that was something that you and I were talking a lot about. You're scooted too far away. I just noticed that you're going to be cut off the screen if you. I need you closer to me. So
okay.
There. So, but I'm sorry that I did that so roughly. See, I apologize. Just how I did that. But these are all the things that we were talking about over the weekend, and part of it is because we are in a situation now, and when I had to give a speech, and we talked about this when I gave a speech at Walter and Holly's wedding, or at their
rehearsal
dinner. One of the things I said to them, and I meant it, was until the moment that they shared that sacrament of holy matrimony together, they were still tethered to us. Holly was tethered to her parents. Walter was tethered to us. We're still related. Right? We still have a relation, but they now are their family. We are, you could say, extended family. We are their relatives. They are their family. A man shall leave his mother, and a woman will leave her home, and the two shall become one. And so I really wanted to emphasize that importance, because there's an autonomy that comes along with that. And I've been using that word a lot these last few days. An autonomy, which means we see you as the people that you are, not as the people that we want you to be, not as the people that we wish you were, not as the people that you used to be. We see you as you are now. And wrapped up in that is, in any past misgivings, I forgive you for. I hope you forgive me for any past misgivings. You know, any sort of father, damage I might have caused to Walter. We've had those conversations, and I've apologized for anything that I may have done wrong, and he's forgiven me. And so I basically want them to be able to go in clean and fresh into this relationship, so that they can introduce God into their relationship, and then they can grow their family from that. And that's how you create positive generations to come. And so what I feel you and I have attempted to do is, you had this extended family member do what happened to you. I've talked about when I was a child, also sexually abused, but by neighbor kids. But there was never any sort of protection that was given, or any, and so even today, everyone says, well, we didn't know it happened. Well, okay. But there was other abuse that occurred. There was physical abuse. There was psychological abuse. There were things that happened that I have to just let go and forgive. And I feel like I've forgiven in my heart. But to your point, sometimes the person needs to hear the forgiveness so that they can heal. But the important thing is do I have to live in the past, which is a past of pain and hurt and brokenness, or do I focus on trying to find a path forward that's going to be good and healthy and holy for you and me, for our children, and for the future? And that's something that, we talked a lot about that this weekend, right? That's where we want to go. And that's what I feel like we've always been trying to do in all of our ministry and everything that we're doing. But sometimes when you try to go down that path, it can be perceived by others that you're shunning, or you're turning your back on them, or whatever it is. And again, going back to how thankful I am for some of the tools I've gotten from therapy, I can't have any control over the thoughts or feelings of other people, just as they cannot have control, even though a lot of times people want to have control over the way I think or feel or act. That's a codependency. When you expect someone else to do something so that you can feel better about something, or your happiness is dependent upon someone doing a certain thing or acting a certain way, you can't do that. And I don't think God expects us to do that. So,
well, I wanted to make a comment about something you said earlier about this path forward, going forward, trying to live this holier, peaceful life, and really putting your best foot forward. To that end, I just wanted to say how difficult that still is to do, because it's going to ask a lot of you. And over the weekend, I was so grateful that we had the opportunity to sort of catch up with Sam and his wife, Rose. And
it's our oldest son.
Yeah. And, he's in his, 26 now?
That's what y'all keep telling me. I don't believe he's 26. But apparently that's where he's at.
So he's a man. He's in his own right,
And let me say, and the reason why I don't believe he's 26 is because that means that we've gotten really old.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't believe like Sam is an adult. And
right.
It's like that's
it's
not
what it means for you.
It's totally a selfish reaction of like, if he's.
And so in that conversation that we were having heart to heart with them, which I truly love, because he has really grown to be such. He has such command over his ability to express himself, and you can tell he thinks before he speaks. And that's great when you can do that. And then there are times when you don't, you speak from pain or emotions and all that. But he has the comfort and the respect to confront me over something I said in the past that has caused him pain in the present. And when a child,
An adult child.
when an adult child does that, one, it takes tremendous courage because a part of them is afraid to do it. A part of them is afraid to go, to approach the parent. So one, that has to be acknowledged is like, wow, that took courage. Okay, thank you for that. The other is the pride that I immediately have to take. I have to take a jab, or I just see it for what it is and immediately turn it into a good. So I have a particular way of responding to the confrontation. And it isn't even a confrontation. It's just like, hey, Mom, I'm not mad, but I do have a question about something that you said that has hurt me. Not that you intended to hurt me, but I need to talk about it because it's hurting me and you're my mom. I'm like, wow, you're right. Okay, what was it? I'm like, oh, yes. You know what? I have to own up to something. If there's an opportunity for me to own up to a mistake, because I'm human and I will make mistakes in love. The Willett story, mistakes in love.
Yeah, you keep trying to throw this as our memoir. That's not going to be the memoir.
But I had to say, okay. So now, for one, okay, so here's the reality of things. When I made a comment, last year, a lot of times when we make comments or jabs or worries or fears, that's the fuel underneath the comment. And we don't really fully know the ramifications of what we say to the ones that we're speaking to. I thought I was making a wise mother correction move, a cautionary tale statement. But really, it wasn't received in that manner because I didn't have all the facts. So I spoke from an emotion of fear. And a lot of times when you speak from fear, it doesn't always go in the right trajectory. And in this case, it didn't. But I didn't know until Sam confronted me and told me. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I felt
and I would say
it wasn't contrition.
It wasn't a confrontation.
No, not at all. It was a moment.
Because I think that there's a learning on both sides here, right? How do you react when someone brings something forward to you? And that's what Sam did.
Yeah, it was a by the way. And I so appreciated the maturity with which he did it so that I could reflect. It's like, all right, let me do the right thing today. Because again, just because things happen in the past, there's always a present that feels the past. And then there's a future that we're trying to protect. And so time is just all open. It's like it's like this fluid thing. And so I didn't want to waste this moment. And I thought, I need to be a good mother in this moment now. Now that I know what I know, it was an opportunity which I'm ultimately super grateful for. And it doesn't feel good. Let me, shatter any illusions of grandeur you may have. Like, it's all like happy, we're laughing. So no, tears came to my eyes right away because I needed to acknowledge the hurting child in the midst and do what I could do to nurture the hurting child in front of me. And he wasn't actively hurting, but it was like such a mature conversation. I'm so grateful that he gave me the chance to sort of clarify things. And it was a great conversation. And I'm like, and ultimately we could be thankful that this is how we talk to our kids, that they feel comfortable enough sharing their heart and that they're mature and strong enough to allow us to share our heart with them. And it's like, this is an amazing thing that we can talk to each other.
And I think part of
it was great.
A good part of that is because our focus has been on, we've always been a family that focuses on reconciliation within the family. And it's taken us 28 years of marriage for me to look and realize that's what we were doing. When our children were young and they offended each other, and it sounds kind of silly, but it's like when they're children, you have to train them. You have to train a child how to be, and then when they're adults, they'll do this. When they were children and they would do something to hurt each other, we would say, you need to say, I'm sorry. And then when they said, I'm sorry, we would turn to the other child and say, now what do you say? And we would expect them to say, I forgive you. It's that two-way side of things. And I think that we're seeing the fruit of that after all these years of the expectation of like, I was wounded, give the person an opportunity to apologize, and then you need to offer the forgiveness. And I think about, I had talking about Sam again, another situation when they were visiting us a year ago, and he brought up something that neither of us remembered.
Right.
And he brought up just a memory he had from early childhood, 3 or 4 years old. And we were trying to help him to sleep through the night. And so here's the position of a parent. It's good to teach the child how to sleep through the night. Depending on, people have different viewpoints of crying it out. With Sam, we were letting him cry it out. Some people say it's not good. I don't,
We're not. That's not the topic of the discussion.
I'm not
Pros
looking,
and cons.
I'm not looking to have pros and cons of,
Yeah.
of letting a kid cry it out. Plus the fact that all of our children sleep through the night now, so I don't care.
It worked for us.
But at this moment, when he was younger, he was crying it out. But he remembers this, even though it was very, very young age. He has a memory of screaming and crying out for his parents, the door opening up, and seeing me, his father, in silhouette in the doorway, saying nothing. Now, from his perspective, and this is what went into his mind and what he's carried through him into adulthood, why didn't Dad comfort me? Why wasn't Dad there for me? And so he brought that up as this painful memory, and I was able to say, number one, I'm sorry, but number two, here's my explanation of why I was doing it, not as an excuse, not as a defense, but as a father, I was trying to help you sleep through the night. When I came to the door, it wasn't to just silently stare at you and condemn you. It was to make sure you're okay.
That you weren't trapped. You didn't have your hand stuck in something.
So suddenly, right, you can, when you look at things from a different perspective, and suddenly I think Sam was able to look at it from a different perspective, but I was able to see his perspective as well. And then we were able to move forward positively and healthfully after having that conversation. And I think that's, these are the kinds of things. And I find myself, more and more these days, really trying. We've had this conversation down for a few weeks that I've wanted to talk about the idea of, when we look at, so we're in our 50s, we're Generation X, which is arguably the best generation.
Of course.
We're
a tough breed.
Well, I mean,
kind of.
You see a lot of things on the internet. It's like we're a tough breed because we don't care. I don't think that's true. I think we care very deeply about things.
Yeah.
But so we were preceded by the baby boomer generation, and then we were followed by millennials, and now it seems like there's more generations. I think they have a new generation like every 3 years now instead of every 15.
Really? Yeah.
But so I don't know. I guess apparently we went from millennial and Gen Y got thrown in there at some point, and then now we're in Gen Z. Poor Gen Ys. They
were overlooked.
They didn't get a moment. I feel bad for them in 30 years when the memes start popping up. It's like, hey, do you remember that one day of our generation? So I don't know what's going to happen for them, but what I bring this up because I had a conversation with a young man recently, and it really jumped out at me how the work behaviors are different than the way that I approach work. Mm-hmm. And it really struck me because then I started seeing it. I've noticed this even with our own children, like when our married kids were dating. A lot of times, a lot of their conversations were via text. It's like, well, you guys do talk, right? I would bring that up from time to time. Yeah. And I really hate texts. I mean, I find texts useful for, like yesterday. Hey, I'm at the grocery store. Can you take a picture of the grocery list on the counter?
That's the majority of our text messages, by the way.
That's super useful.
If you delete all those messages from your phone, you'd have like 2 gigs of space open up.
Yeah. It's like, hey, which email did we use for that account? Thanks. I don't have to go downstairs to ask you that, right? That's where text is useful. Or sending silly, memes or jokes. But when you try to have a conversation via text,
like a heart to heart,
like a heart to heart,
no. Yeah.
And so I regularly, people will, if someone wants to say something to me, particularly extended family, they'll say some like deep, almost contentious thing, and I'm like, this is not a text conversation. I understand it's convenient, and sometimes with the group message, but it's like just there seems to sometimes be a lack of prudence about how messages are delivered via text, and this has been my argument for years. Same thing with email. The written word, you can't always convey tone, right? And just how I just changed my tone. In a text, it could be like, text messages don't convey tone. It's like you just don't know how it's coming across, right? And so the person on the other end might read it wrong. I see it more and more now between, I'm just going to use Generation X and Generation Z. I'll use those two, right?
Okay.
Rather than say millennial. I see the conversational differences of how work is done and how relationships are done, and contentious topics are done. And it really has made me start to wonder how do we work together better? Because what I've really and I will say I think that this is a providential gift. What I've started to really realize is these younger generations have a lot to offer, but their work styles are so drastically different that I think it's the responsibility of the older generation to figure out how to work with the younger generation instead of the younger generation trying to figure out how to work with the older.
Right, because they can't.
They don't know
The
how.
younger generation won't know, but the older generation should be wise enough to recognize that the difference is there.
Yeah.
And to that point, when we look at the generation above us, our elders, like where my parents were, there was a generational difference there in terms of what we talked about or what conversations were fair game to be had out in the open. And I remember witnessing that when my mother moved into our Indiana home, and I started to I have a front row seat to how she handled the death of my father, her husband, after 50 years. And you realize when a person endures a really painful, traumatic experience as the loss of a spouse after that many years of marriage, they will default to an emotional response of some previously learned behavior or something because they don't know what to do. And she went right in, very much interior, and just folded in on herself. And there was no conversation. And I thought, how bizarre, because we're in the generation where we talk about our feelings. We talk about them. We don't want to bottle this up. And sometimes you could even say we over talk about our feelings.
And I would agree with that. I think it's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
It's not that we're doing it right, not that we're doing it the right way.
Right. But we're part of a different approach.
Yeah.
And Sam called that out, and he was like, thank you for that. Because of what your generation did, meaning Greg and mine, our Gen X generation, we realized something is not right in the room here. We're starting to sniff it out, like we are seeing a different reality other than what's perceived. Like we got to talk about it, but we're making some mistakes in our wanting to process verbally a ton. But the generation that followed got very savvy with it, and that's our son's generation, the Gen, what is it, Z?
I don't know if he's millennial or not.
Yeah. They're like, let's be more discerning about this. Let's be more critical. But we're in this generation where we can pick up on the goodness of both sides. And so it's kind of a cool thing that you can see unfolding before you. A lot of people are actually in therapy now, maybe more than ever before. Now, there are lots of reasons why, and we're not trying to debate why a lot of people are in therapy, except that there is a value to it because we're better able to articulate the behaviors that we don't know why. Like when someone is retreating into silence and they're super moody, there is a reason for that. And we can talk about it calmly and explore and see, well, what's the best next move here? And sometimes that takes years to achieve that more mentally healthful living.
We've apparently already moved past Gen Z. I didn't know this.
There's a lot of generational names.
Yeah,
okay, what's the list?
All right, so here's the silent generation is 1925 to 1945.
All right, so my parents were born in 1942.
Yeah,
so
mine were in 37.
And so that really let's not breeze past that.
Yeah.
The silent generation is actually quite huge. So if you know anyone born in those years from 1925 to 1945. Okay, so if you're in your 20s right now and you're hearing this will explain how your grandparents are likely
or
great-grandparents are not able to really talk. And it's not that they're not wanting to. It's almost like they don't have the ability to. There is something bigger going on there.
I don't know if that's what silent generation
It's a
means.
Default position of silence. Okay, so you just have to know it's there.
The baby boomer generation are those born between 1946 and 1964.
According to this, who is the authority of this website?
This is from careerplanner.com.
Okay, so they know the truth.
All right, so Generation X, which is us, they're the ones who were born between 1965 and 1979.
Wow, that's a big spread.
I didn't think it started as early as 65.
Yeah.
But so we're squarely Generation X. We're both born in 1970. So 1965 to 79. Zennials, which I didn't know was a thing, were born between 75 and 85. So like this kind of like the tweeners that were there but not quite. So they're still kind of there.
Wait, what does that mean? They don't exist?
I don't know.
They're ghosts?
If
Like
you
what?
were born, if you were
What are you
born,
saying?
if you were born between 1975 and 1985, we don't see you.
It's terrible.
You were if you were born between 1975 and 1985, you were babies when Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi was released.
It's a weird time to be born. We're sorry. That's according to careerplanner.com.
Now, okay, so then they group millennials and Gen Y and Gen Next together. So I guess they kept changing the name or something. I don't know.
Okay.
1980 to 1994. So even still, our kids aren't in there.
No,
And then they have
not.
this iGen and Gen Z, and this is where our kids are all falling. 95 to 2012. So
Gen Z.
all
All of our kids
all
are
of our
Gen
kids,
Z.
according to
That's
this.
nuts.
And then Gen Alpha is the current from 2013 to 2025. So
The babies of today.
babies of today. And so when I look at this, there was one when I started thinking about these things, I immediately started thinking, is there a book on this? Has someone written how do we in Gen X, how do we get the most out of Gen Z? How do we
But not for an like a selfish motive. Like
No.
we're going to get the most out of them. It's like no.
No,
but
totally.
How can we have a fruitful conversation?
No.
that bears fruit.
How do we totally take advantage of them? That's what. How do we manipulate
They're
them?
a labor workforce.
How do we manipulate them to our own means?
You see how many Teslas they
That's-
drive? They're really smart. We need that.
Do you see how many Teslas they do? I don't think they drive a lot of Teslas.
I don't know.
I
I'm
think they'd
just-
argue with you on that.
I'm just throwing
I think
that
they're
out
like
there.
all you Gen Xers are driving Teslas, though. I don't know how anyone
I
affords
don't
a
know.
Tesla.
It's getting
But
hot in here.
okay,
Yeah.
let's not jump to
No.
menopause. But because let's be honest, that's why she's acting that way. Got all that hair flush. Anyway.
Whew. Okay.
Let me finish my sentence.
Yeah.
I started doing some research. One of the best resources I found was over at CatholicWorldReport.com. And there was a series of articles that was written in late 2000 or in 2022. And I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes as well in case you want to be able to find this. But it's from Benjamin Erickson. I actually tried to track this guy down, couldn't find a direct email address because I wanted to have him on the program to talk about it. But he wrote a series of articles about walking with Gen Z. And so the article titles, and I'll jump to the bottom of it, is just understanding what he called the loneliest generation, which if you think about it, they're very immersed in social media, which was supposed to be social, but instead it has increased a level of loneliness and isolation among people. The next article was distrust of institutions and organized religion. The religiously complex generation, steps toward flourishing, reaching youth with relational authority, and how to dialogue with Gen Z. And so some interesting ideas in there, again, because going back to what we were saying at the very beginning, I think it's really important that we don't always expect people to react, act, be the way that we want them to be. And so if because of generational forces or because of cultural forces or because of whatever's happening in the world type forces. I mean, if you think about it, like our oldest children were toddlers, our two oldest kids were toddlers when 9/11 happened. So most of their formational years, and then as their siblings were born, their formational years were post 9/11 world. Well, think about how different the world is post 9/11 to pre 9/11. And it's our responsibility as elders to have some compassion for these kids to help, that they don't fully understand the way that things were.
So to that end, we want to say, go outside and play because we remember that world and we see that our kids don't have that because they were brought up in a world that had instantly more of a shutdown feel. It was more secure, tighter security. That's the post 9/11 world. And they're not as free to move. They're kind of born into a jail cell in a weird way. And so we can't expect them to understand that claim get outside and play, or it's a lot harder.
Especially since some of those kids, those same kids, that even though they've had that, then it was backed up and solidified in the COVID world.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Then it was even more. See, you can't go outside.
Yeah.
What your parents kept trying to throw at you. And so you have to understand that they have a mindset that we need to understand.
Yes, we have to acknowledge that there is a different mindset, and we can't fault them for it. We can't make them feel bad for being that way because it's literally how they're shaped. And so it's like, okay, but once you know the differences are there, it will improve your dialogue in the present.
Yeah.
It just will, because you're going to have the understanding, and you can impart that to your child and say, now you're going to also need to be understanding for your children who will have a whole different set of circumstances in their life.
Yep. Well,
Man.
great conversation. I've had so much love for you the last few days, and just I hope you felt love from me and all the talking that we've done.
Yes.
And so now I'm going to stop talking for the next 3 weeks. No, I'm kidding. But speaking of the next 3 weeks, we're actually getting ready to enter into Lent, which means a whole other
That's coming.
which means a whole other level of suffering. When
By choice.
when you're getting this right now, depending on when you listen to it, if you hear this or watch this on or before February 12th, and it's most likely not going to be before, we are launching a brand new cycle of total consecration to Jesus through Mary. I said we are. It's oftentimes it's historically a cycle for preparation of total consecration. This starts on February 12th and ends on March 25th. And we've been reminding you lately that over at schoolofmary.com, we have an entire 33-day platform for preparation for total consecration, where we join you in saying the prayers, and then there's a reflection every single day. You can download, I have it this time, you can download the 100-page workbook for free from School of Mary that has all the prayers in it, some journaling pages. It's a great resource for Lent, and it's completely free. We made it because we believe it's good for your soul, and we believe it has the power to transform your life by going through total consecration. It's something that we've been devoting a great amount of our time and resources to for many years now, and School of Mary is the fruit of that. I was able to pull it out, but I can't put it back.
Just give it to me.
No,
Just
there,
give it to me.
There,
No.
I got rid of it.
Okay.
I have a magic net underneath the desk here. But it's coming up very soon. If you are hearing this or seeing this past February 12th, go ahead and start. Jump in, do your best to catch up. When you join School of Mary, there's some orientation videos that we ask you to sit through. It'll take you about 20 minutes to get through them all.
Just to help you understand how the website works.
How
That's
the
really
website
what it's
works,
for.
why we're doing all this
Yeah.
stuff. And once you get past that, you have full access not only to total consecration, but to our resources for making rosaries, praying the rosary, all sorts of other things. And we're trying to add more content. We have another program coming very, very soon on true devotion, on
Introduction to the Devout Life.
From St. Francis de Sales. Deacon Matt Newsom was in the studio recently, and we're working on that program for you. But we really want to encourage you to think about and pray about and then actually do preparation for total consecration. We want as many people as possible doing this. We're trying to improve it as we go along, and so a few people have gone through the program already to great success and had amazing things to say. Super excited to get the feedback that we do anytime someone finishes total consecration, and how they just I'm really edified by the fact that we did the reflections, and it's sort of like, well, let's do these. I don't know if it's going to work. This is one of the occasions where the whole Field of Dreams thing worked. We built it. People are showing up, and they're benefiting from it. So it's like, okay, good, that worked. So
That was the Holy Spirit.
that resource is available to you. And
Yep.
so some other Lenten resources, and we'll remind you of these throughout the course of Lent, that we've made available. Last year, we did a meditation straight from the 1962 Roman Missal that was a Stations of the Cross that you can still find on our YouTube channel. I'll try to remember to put a link to that as well. And that is still available, where we put up images, and it's something that, if you're looking for Stations of the Cross, you can do that. There's a couple other versions of Stations of the Cross that you can find if you search around on Rosary Army's website or on our past podcasts. We did a recording of John Paul II's Stations of the Cross years ago, and that's still available. And then when I was with the Archdiocese of Denver, Jason Taylor, who I worked with there, he and I did a Stations of the Cross based off of the meditations of St. Alphonsus Liguori, and I'll try to put a link to that in the show notes as well. So whether you're looking at this on YouTube, it's down below, or over on our website at rosaryarmy.com. You should see all those links there if you want to be able to access all of those things. I'll put them in there to help you have a good start to the Lent. What are you going to do this year for Lent?
Well, first of all, I am renewing my annual consecration. So I will be on this cycle that starts February 12th and ends on the Feast of the Annunciation. So I'm very, very ready to jump back into the discipline of the prayers.
Are you going to watch our own videos?
No, because
I think you should watch the reflections.
oh man, that's gonna be tough.
You know why?
I'm worried I'm gonna be distracted by myself.
No.
Oh,
not the prayers.
what? Okay,
Do-
the
do-
commentary.
Yeah, watch the commentary. And the reason why is because I think it'd be good for you and I to revisit it so that we can be better participants on the community.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. For
Fair enough. I'm not going to do it. Fair enough.
okay, I really liked what I did last Lent, and I'm going to do it again because it was hard. Not that it was enjoyable. When I say I liked it because it was challenging. And so I'm going straight to messing with my food intake.
Oh, yeah.
And really push myself to drop those grains out of my diet because I have started to just be super lax on it, and I'm starting to eat more of it and be like, what's one time, And I want to just draw a hard line across those. And if you want to hear what grains I'm talking about, it's basically flour, rice, corn, and sugar. Reduce the sugar. I can't eliminate it 100%, but I can really reduce an overly sweet thing.
What if they did want to hear what grains you're talking about? Can you take that back?
Sugar, retract. Okay. And then now here's where I'm struggling. As we were sitting through Mass yesterday, I was reading in our copy of Benedictus. They oftentimes will have an additional historical reflection like, hey, did you know the history of fasting? And I always like revisiting that historical narrative of how the church has handled fasting and how it's gotten significantly reduced in its strictness over the years, especially in the last 50 years or so. But it used to be a lot harder. And so there's always this call to challenge oneself. And so I thought maybe I can incorporate the Wednesday fast as well and abstinence. And so traditionally the church always throughout the entire year handled Wednesdays and Fridays as days of fasting and abstinence. And particularly if you're going to, when you do start eating, it's 3 o'clock on and no meat. So you can eat at 3 p.m. on Wednesday and Friday, but no meat on either one of those days. And so we definitely have been abstaining from meat on Fridays as a normal part of our Catholic life now. But that's still kind of a new thing. I mean, we started that maybe 5 years ago.
No, longer than that.
7 years ago, maybe something like that. 7 or 8 years ago. But the Wednesdays is a new thing for me but I think I want to do it. So I'm saying it out loud here kind of to, hold myself accountable that if I can grab that Wednesday and because it's just well timed, it's like, it's just a good time of the week to do it.
Yeah. So is that mainly food? Is it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely want to mess with food because that is, there's a reason. And when you start poking with your sustenance, because we enjoy, we experience celebrations with food. We do so much. We comfort ourselves with food. And so that's why I want to target food. Yeah. What about you?
Well, I'm probably going to do the food thing again.
What about you did some technology stuff last year.
And I've done that kind of for the last few years, and I find it really beneficial. I basically isolate the tech from the bedroom. I'm a little thrown off because I've really, last year we got a sitting chair for the bedroom, and I oftentimes will sit in there on my computer and write. Yeah. So I have to. I'm debating on that, but I might just say no phone, no iPad, like I've done in the past in the bedroom at all. No entertainment in there.
Right.
I eliminate any sort of online games and that kind of thing, except for I allow myself to do it on the weekend. And I'll probably do those kinds of things. I haven't really narrowed down a book yet, but the Total Consecration is going to be the main thing. But I like to try to pick a book. We have a book that just showed up that I wanted to. We still might try to have her on during Lent if we can arrange it. But I asked Sophia to send me a copy of this book. It's from Susan Salmons. It's called The Stations of the Cross in Slow Motion. It's a daily devotion for Lent. Haven't read it yet, but it has basically a devotion every day during Lent for you to meditate on the Stations of the Cross. And I kind of like that. It's it's a digestible thing, and I think that that's something that I might try to tackle.
And I'm glad you said that, because I too have felt a hole in my religious reading. I've been focusing a lot on fiction books right now that do have some, matters of, themes of faith, can always be drawn out of a fictional work. But I have missed a deeper dive into something overtly religious.
Yeah.
And so I have not continued my reading of The City of God by Sister Mary of Agreda. And I have been missing that. It's been on my mind. I literally think about it at least every other day for the last year. It's like, I want to go back to that. I want to, you know what? I'm going to use Lent to get back into it, because it just does something different for your heart, mind, and soul when you saturate yourself with words of wisdom and holiness than you could ever get from, a reading of a piece of classical literature. I'm not, there's a place for that. And I like doing both. And so I'm really just super grateful that I've really just picked up on my reading this year. I've read a lot just in January alone, all different kinds of books. And so I'm grateful for that. And I'm going to be incorporating more spiritual reading for sure during Lent because of what it can do.
And
soul.
I'm not committing to this, but I'm going to attempt a challenge, and I don't know how successful I'll be. But
I'm going to hold you to it now. Just kidding. Go. Say.
I'm going to eat every day.
No.
breathe air. I'm going to breathe air every day. No, I had an idea that of writing a rosary meditation, a Lenten rosary meditation every day. Nothing overly long, a few pages, and then if I could do that every day during Lent, then that might be material that I could pitch to a publisher for next year. So a Lenten rosary meditation. So it's like you're going to pray your rosary every day anyway.
Okay, I have a piece of advice, or a proposition, not advice, a proposition for you, so that hopefully you can be successful. And I know this will be hard, because once you get going, you're going to feel this overwhelming temptation to write a well thought out narrative meditation. But to keep it short, write 1 or 2 really good sentences just to get it out. And you can always go back and pad it later. But just for the sake of getting it all, having something new every day that isn't maybe a copy of the day before, but a new thought every day, save your resources in your mind so that you always have something. And then, because if you let 3 days go by, it's going to be harder to grab
but I won't
those holes.
Basically, I was going to tie it to praying my rosary. Like, I won't pray my rosary until I've done it. Like, I'll sit down.
But sometimes, what do you do for the car rosaries?
Same thing. I'm going to make it a goal before I go anywhere.
Oh, okay.
That I'll do it, so that I'm thinking about, and because I'm also hoping it's going to improve my rosaries, right? So that it's making my rosaries even more meaningful.
More reflective.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You didn't realize it, but you kind of quoted Hemingway a second ago, and he was always in search of one true sentence. So it's
was he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was his whole thing.
All right.
All right. Well, total consecration, that's the big thing that you need to take out of that. You don't do anything else except consecrate yourself to Jesus through Mary. Go over to schoolofmary.com. No. For Lent, that's all you're allowed to do this year. So is saith Greg. Thank you for being here. Pray your rosary. Wait a minute. Pray your rosary every single day.
And do whatever it takes to be holy.
RosaryArmy.com. Find resources to grow in your faith. We'll talk to you again in a few days. God bless you, folks. Oh, RosaryArmy.com/donate if you want to help us out.